Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is Friday, March 10th. This is voting list 12. We have about 12 bills, I believe, before us for consideration this afternoon. We're going to start with Nathan and Senate Bill 213.
Senate Bill 213 defines clinical nurse specialist and practice as a clinical nurse specialist for the purpose of authorizing clinical nurse specialists to prescribe drugs and durable medical equipment under regulations adopted by the Board of Nursing. So the bill designates a CNS as an authorized prescriber under the Maryland Pharmacy Act, and also authorizes a physician to personally prepare and dispense a prescription written by an advanced practice registered nurse with prescriptive authority, working with a physician in the same office setting. So the chair is offering some amendments that include individuals who hold a multi-state license under the Nurse Licensure Compact in the definition of clinical nurse specialist, and make some other technical changes. Those amendments were requested by the board in their favorable with amendment testimony. The cross file has passed the House with identical amendments.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable with amendments on Senate Bill 213. Are there any questions? Senator Vital?
The compact, is it?
No,
Okay.
ma'am. No, this is clinical nurse specialist prescribing authority. Okay, so 2013 favorable with amendments. All those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous report. Next bill.
Senate Bill 375 establishes an emeritus status for physicians and authorizes the Board of Physicians to place a licensee on emeritus status under specified circumstances. The bill specifies that a licensee of the board on emeritus or inactive status may not practice medicine or delegate medical acts. The bill exempts a licensee on emeritus or inactive status from the three-year limit on the term of a license, and also from continuing education requirements. The bill also aligns reinstatement requirements for a licensee on emeritus or inactive status. There are also clarifying amendments on this bill offered by the chair. That amendment clarifies that a physician on emeritus or inactive status must comply with certain continuing education requirements before resuming active practice.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable with amendments on Senate Bill 375. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous report. Next bill.
Senate Bill 449 clarifies the definition of practice audiology by specifying that practice audiology includes the prescribing, ordering, selling, dispensing, or fitting of a hearing aid to an individual for the correction or relief of a condition for which such devices are worn. The amendments add a sponsor, strike references to Osseo integrated devices, clarifies the definition of hearing aid dispensing, and that it includes ordering prescription hearing aids, and clarifies that specified provisions of state law that conflict with federal laws and regulations do not apply to over-the-counter hearing aids, and alter the bill's effective date. And there's no fiscal impact.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable on Senate Bill 449 as amended. Are there any questions? Is there any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. That bill receives a unanimous report. I think we're turning to Patrick now for Senate Bill 140.
Senate Bill 140 would require the State Highway Administration to designate the bridge across Fishing Creek on Maryland Route 261 in Calvert County as the Fallen Heroes Fishing Creek Bridge. I have an amendment that the sponsor is offering. There had been some question about whether there was already a dedication of the bridge to a public official down there, but there's been some dialogue, and so they think they've got a path to resolve the issues. So with the feedback from State Highway, the amendment would require the administration to name the bridge across Fishing Creek as the fallen heroes Fishing Creek Bridge, and they think that they can then do a dedication to this individual. So the bridge would be named that, and then the dedication could be accomplished through some signage to this individual.
Just a moment. I had a question from Senator Bidel, please. Senator.
I remember legislation from the House that we didn't need to do bills to name bridges and roads any longer. Is this different because it's fallen heroes versus a designated name?
I think, I mean, so the testimony from the Department of Transportation is what they have submitted in the past, that there is a process, where parties can come forward and request for a designation. The feedback from them is that they can do this.
Okay,
And
just
they've been
curious.
working with the sponsor.
There is a process,
There's a process.
but we also use the 90 days here as a process.
This is a process.
This is the process here.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion now.
Yes.
It was out of, yes. Motion, it was Hayes as the favorable, and who was the second? Kramer. Okay. Have a motion and a second for a favorable. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposition? Nope, that bill receives a unanimous report. Hang in there, guys. Hang in there. We're getting there. Patrick.
Senate Bill 496. This is the bill that establishes a regulatory framework for commercial financing transactions, including certain open-end, closed-end, and sales-based financing transactions, as well as factoring and renewal financing transactions. More specifically, the bill establishes disclosure requirements on providers of commercial financing, including required information on fees and finance charges, the annual percentage rate for which there are required methods for calculating the APR in the bill, and repayment terms. Under the bill, the Office of the Commissioner of Financial Regulation must adopt regulations to implement the bill, and these regulations must be substantially the same as regulations adopted in New York regarding commercial financing. This was the bill that relates to the revenue-based financing transactions to small businesses. And the sponsor, Senator Kramer, has some amendments that are reflected in the reprint that I can run through. The first one just makes a corrective change to the title of the bill. It actually doesn't pertain to consumer credit, so it strikes that from the small title. And then on page, let's see. Page 10. There is a technical, there's an amendment that was requested by Fiserv and First Data that would clarify this reporting requirement, that this annual review relating to sales-based financing is only for companies that use a certain opt-in method of projecting sales volume, not for those who use a historical method. So the bill would clarify that reporting requirement. And then the last amendment is in the back 2 pages of the reprint. And there had been some folks that had come forward who represent captives. So these are folks who engage in equipment leasing and financing. And so there was a request from some of the folks who do this equipment leasing and financing, as well as some of the Builders and Materials Association and the Asphalt Association, seeking an exemption from the bill concerning equipment leasing, and specifically an entity principally engaged in the business of making commercial financing products in connection with the purchase or lease of products manufactured or distributed by its direct or indirect parent company, or any direct or indirect subsidiary of that parent company. And then there was also a request to exempt from the bill certain purchase money obligations as defined under the Uniform Commercial Code. So I think Caterpillar, for example, was one of these companies that says that they engage in this type of leasing, this type of financing that they think, may be impacted negatively for them under some of the disclosure requirements under the bill. Senator Kramer has drafted an amendment that would include these exemptions, but subject to a contingency, so that they would only be exempted if New York includes in their law this exemption for these this type of entity in this transaction. And so what would happen is if New York adopted this exemption in their law, then the Commissioner of Financial Regulation would monitor this and notify the General Assembly, Department of Legislative Services of this contingency taking place, and then that would go in effect. And so this uncodified language on the back of the bill would implement that contingency. If this doesn't happen within 1 year of the effective date of the bill, if New York doesn't act to exempt these entities, then this part of the bill, which exempts which creates these two exemptions, would be null and void. So the concept here is that the Maryland law would reflect New York law if they implement this change.
Senator Hershey, and then, sorry, Senator Kramer.
I was gonna ask Senator Kramer if and if you're gonna talk anyways, then just what was the impetus of this bill and why is it necessary?
Oh, the bill is very necessary because this industry is really the payday loan industry for small mom and pop business. And they have been taking significant advantage of our mom and pop businesses. You may recall that the gentleman who sat at the table there telling us what a wonderful product he offers. Also, I questioned him about the pages and pages and pages of lawsuits that he has been filing against the same small businesses they make these loans to, because these small businesses get trapped. And it turns out they don't realize, because of the way this industry works, that they're actually paying 100, 200, 300% interest. And it just becomes a spiral down there. And then these entities go in and seize their assets. So the whole purpose of the bill is to bring clarity. Right now, if you're going to put something on your credit card or you're going to borrow money from the bank, you get an annual percentage rate. This industry has been hiding what they charge in the way of interest, and that has been the problem. These small mom and pop businesses, and traditionally, we don't necessarily get involved in business to business transactions. But in this case, and by the way, the bill limits it to loans under $2.5 million. So yes, we are going to work on the assumption that if the loan is greater than $2.5 million, there is a greater level of sophistication between the lender and the borrower. But so many of our small mom and pop businesses get caught up, just like when people were caught up with payday loans, being confused with misrepresentations. It's a very aggressive industry. And the bottom line, and for those of you who've been on the committee for a little while, when the bill was first introduced, it was a flat out prohibition on these kinds of loans, just like we did with payday loans. We banned them. The industry came to this committee and said, hey, regulate us. Don't ban us, regulate us. We do serve a purpose. And I was willing to look at and listen. And I came back with, okay, then let's not be the Wild West. Let's regulate. And then they came in and started saying, well, we don't want these regulations. We want those regulations, do this, do that. Then the next year they came in and said, oh, this is going to be patchwork. So I thought I had made a deal with the industry when I said, okay, California, fourth largest economy on the planet, is doing this. We'll follow their regulations. We'll follow New York's regulations. And they said, okay, then it's not a patchwork. California passed their regulations. New York did theirs. The two states worked hand in hand. The bill mimics to a T what New York has done. And the whole point was, if this industry can compete in California, if they can compete in New York, then we should provide the same protection for our small mom and pop businesses here in Maryland, and they'll be able to compete here as well. The very last piece that was brought up just now related to some folks who came to me several times and they said, well, this is a little bit problematic for us. And I said, well, but you're in New York and nobody wanted patchwork. And I promised we would mimic New York. They represented that they're going to be amended. They're working to be amended out of New York, that they've got the senator who sponsored the bill there, who has indicated he'll offer a new bill to take them out. I said, okay, here's the deal. You get out of New York, you get out of Maryland. If you don't get out of New York, you stay in Maryland. And that's that last amendment, so that once again, no patchwork. We follow strictly what New York, and this is what the industry said repeatedly. Now, to their credit, half of the industry is completely behind the bill and supportive now. And I refer to those as the legitimate ones who say, look, we don't like the bad actors out there who are doing the things that the bill addresses. It puts us at a competitive disadvantage. So you said you would do what, you made a promise to us, you've kept it, we support the bill. Having said that, there are still others out there who don't want to be regulated and are never going to support anything. So that's where we are. Colleagues, the bill passed unanimously off the Senate floor last year, got to ECM very late in the game. So I'm hoping we'll do the same this year and we'll get it across the finish line.
Thank you. Senator Mounts?
Who in the industry is supporting it this year?
There's a whole coalition and they were here testifying. They gave written testimony with all the lenders, these kinds of lenders that are part of this large coalition. And the representatives of the coalition came in and said, every one of the lenders that you see on, that we provided to the committee, we're supporting it and acknowledge they originally did not support the bill. They do now.
Okay.
And they came in and testified at the hearing that, they said Kramer kept his word, we're keeping ours.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion if there's no further discussion. Have a motion and a second for the favorable. Yep, gotcha. All those in favor, raise your hand. Favorable as amended on Senate Bill 496. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Next bill.
Senate Bill, Senate Bill 554. This is the Maryland National Guard TRICARE Premium Reimbursement Program Establishment Bill, Healthcare Heroes Act of 2023. This is an administration bill that establishes a TRICARE Premium Reimbursement Program in the military department for the purpose of awarding grants to reimburse members of the Maryland National Guard for premiums paid for individual or dependent coverage under TRICARE Reserve Select or the TRICARE Dental Program. The chair is offering some amendments that would establish a cap on the maximum amount of a grant award, so that under the amendment, a grant award may reimburse an eligible recipient for up to $60 of the total amount of premiums paid each month by the eligible recipient. So this would reduce the potential fiscal note in the out years if there's certain, yes.
Okay. Motion is on a favorable with amendments and there's a second. Any questions on Senate Bill 554 as amended?
Individual premium and dental.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Seeing no opposition, that bill receives a unanimous favorable report. Thank you. Next bill.
Senate Bill 589. This is Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages Bill. It extends the sunset for certain provisions associated with a related event promoter's permit issued by the Baltimore City Board of License Commissioners. The related event promoter's permit was established to provide for events related to the Central Intercollegiate Athletic Association basketball tournament. It also shortens the timeframes for applicants to apply for a permit, for the board to grant or deny a permit, and for a permit to be altered before the scheduled related event. The bill also changes the standard for determining permit fees and clarifies that a related event includes an event for which tickets are sold to the public either in advance or at the door, or for which a cover charge is imposed. The amendment alters the sunset date in the bill for provisions associated with the related event promoter's permit from June 30th, 2025 to June 30th, 2024.
Any questions on the bill? Have a motion and a second for a favorable as amended on Senate. I have a motion and a second for a favorable on Senate Bill 589. No questions. All those in favor, raise your hand. That bill is unanimous. Next bill.
Senate Bill 793 establishes consumer protections relating to the repair, replacement of motor vehicle glass on vehicles equipped with an advanced driver assistance system, or ADAS. ADAS is a system that uses automated technology, including cameras and sensors, to detect nearby obstacles and driver errors. When a vehicle is equipped with ADAS, a facility that repairs or replaces motor vehicle safety glass and provides related recalibration of ADAS under the bill must inform the customer before repairing or replacing the glass if recalibration of such a system is required. A facility must also provide the customer with a statement that the work to be performed on the vehicle will meet or exceed original equipment manufacturer specifications. The bill then requires that recalibration performed by a facility meet or exceed the manufacturer's specifications. It prohibits a facility from charging for services that are not performed or successfully completed, and requires a facility to inform the customer if recalibration is not performed or successfully completed. The sponsor has offered an amendment that requires that this statement provided to a customer be written, and the amendment also makes a technical correction.
Senator Reedy.
So is it fair to say this is basically an informational bill? This is just providing information to the consumer to make sure they know what they're getting. And do you think it's unlikely customers already know that they've got that kind of windshield, or, but it's not requiring anything other than just information to the consumer and require, because you're already required, aren't you, under law to perform work up to manufacturer standards, right? Or
yeah, so I think that the proponents of the legislation put this in because they think that consumers may not be aware that that their windshield needs this type of recalibration if they do a window repair, and that's becoming more common with vehicles, and so there are generally disclosure requirements in the bill to make sure that consumers are aware of that. I think one thing that came through is that legislation last year was a little different and presented some concerns for some of the independent repair shops. But
this one has their support.
But yes, but the way that the bill was drafted this year, the way that it's introduced is that they're more comfortable with it because they can perform the services. They just need to provide the notice that's required under the bill.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Because okay. All right. That's fine. Thank you very much.
Any additional questions? 793 as amended? Is there amendments? No.
There's answers.
Yeah. No, I'll entertain a motion. Okay, on the favorable as amended and a second. Are there any additional questions? All those in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous.
Thanks for the confirmation.
Next bill.
So Senate Bill 806 requires the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange and the Maryland Department of Health to develop a report comparing options for offering affordable health care coverage to state residents who are ineligible for Medicaid, the Maryland Children's Health Program, MCHIP, or qualified health plans due to immigration status. The report must include a comparison of the cost to the state, the impact on the uninsured, potential benefit designs, and implementation considerations for offering coverage to technically and financially eligible individuals, but for immigration status through Medicaid and MCHIP and qualified health plans offered through the exchange. The report comparison must also examine offering coverage to all who are eligible individuals age 21 and older, individuals who are at least age 65, and lower income individuals only. The sponsor has offered actually two amendments. The first would make Senator Kelly the lead sponsor and add Senator Kelly as the sponsor, make her the primary sponsor. And then the second would modify the study to include dental care coverage in the examination that they'll do as a part of putting this report together.
Okay, any questions on this bill, which is a report?
Just a report.
Just a report.
Move favorable. Change the title.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable. You want to change the title to report on the Maryland?
Scratch a couple words in that.
We're being transparent. It's a report. I have a motion and a second for a favorable. Are there any questions? All those in favor, raise your hand. Oh, shoot, I was like, whoo. Okay, was that seven? That's seven?
7-3.
It's a report.
Okay, so that report bill,
Reports are like around here.
that report bill receives a favorable report. We'll move to the next bill. Okay.
Okay,
Was it-
the next, oh, you're on the other side of the voting list. Yeah, the fun, now you're at the fun ones.
Four little bitty bills,
Uh,
almost done.
the first bill on your list is concerns, it's a statewide alcoholic beverage bill. Several years ago, you, as a General Assembly, created a part of the law that allow in-state breweries and distillers to ship their products, either buy them through their own business or through a common carrier, the mail, UPS, etc., to a customer inside the state of Maryland. You extended this this was done because of COVID. You extended that once. This bill in front of you extends that sunset for another 2 years, but there are some amendments. And if you go straight to the let's see, page 3 of the amendments. The authorization to ship product in state from in-state wine or brewers and distillers. This is the language that authorizes that, but it's modified to limit what can be shipped in state. And if you go to the bottom, you'll see that an amount of alcohol not to exceed more than the equivalent of 18 bottles of liquor during a year, or amount of alcohol not to exceed more than 3,456 ounces of beer over the course of a year. That's the equivalent of, you can ask the sponsor, she knows. Yeah. It's the equivalent of 1 case of beer a month. So it's the equivalent of 12, it would be the equivalent of 12 cases of beer a year.
Consumer.
I mean,
That's
to
one
a consumer in the state
Okay,
of
It
Maryland.
almost sounded to me like it was all they could ship, but it's to a
It's
consumer.
limited to that, to a consumer in Maryland.
Okay.
Yes,
Senator Reedy.
And is it it's a 2 year, is it still 2 years with the
it's a
amendment?
2-year extension, sunset extension, yes.
But it's just, you can get one 12-pack per month from one I was gonna say distillery, but that's not what they are, brewery. But it would be from anywhere in the country, correct?
No, it's only from a Maryland-based brewer and distiller to a Maryland consumer.
How do we get around? Isn't there issues with that with federal, like? Yeah, the Commerce Clause.
There have been arguments made during testimony that this could be unconstitutional. That would.
It's
be
never
up-
stopped this before.
Yeah,
but I
it would
mean,
be
yeah.
up for somebody to challenge that. But this was done because of COVID, and the argument is that some of these businesses still need this to stay ahead of the losses they had during the pandemic.
If I could add.
Yeah.
So it's to extend out the sunset for a couple more years while we work out a solution that perhaps may not necessarily be subject. I mean, this is not to say that it is unconstitutional necessarily, but I realize that there has been suggestions made that there may be a constitutional challenge, but it's just to say, okay, we'll extend it out for 2 years while we work out a solution so we can continue supporting these businesses that have already been doing this, that would given this temporary allowance, I guess, during COVID.
So, okay, oh, yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I appreciate that. So I don't have a hard, it's not something where I'm like, I've had my local people tell me that, they're not for it. And so I'm just trying to understand better. This is one case per consumer, but one consumer can get as many cases as they want from 18 different breweries, but the brewery itself is limited to one case per that customer per month. Is that?
Well,
okay?
not in one case, over the course of a year. So I guess you could argue that they could get it all at once, but they wouldn't be able to get any more from that particular.
No, I understand. I just mean,
It averages it would average out to about that a month.
got it. No, okay.
Okay, we got Reedy. Oh, did you turn it off? Okay, we'll go over to Hershey.
Thank you, Madam. Chair. Just to clarify, the constitutional challenge could be what?
The dormant commerce clause, basically you can't treat certain businesses from one particular state any differently than a business from a different state. Yeah, so that's what the argument is. But I do know that a solution is being worked out to hopefully solve that problem. But the stakeholders need some more time to get that sorted out.
So a manufacturer from outside the state would sue, saying that Maryland allows manufacturers within the state to ship to each other, but I can't ship. Manufacturer outside the state can't ship into the state.
That's true. There's a possibility that a manufacturer from outside the state could say that it's a violation of the dormant commerce clause. That being said, we've had this for 2 years now, and thus far, there hasn't been any lawsuit on that issue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Reedy, were you still on?
Oh, I
from last
apologize.
time? Okay, Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I do have concerns about direct shipping. I've always had those concerns, and this was done by Governor Hogan during the pandemic with the understanding that this was going to be a very short term opportunity to be exempted out of state law. And then the industry came back last year to have it extended. Now the industry is back again this year looking to be extended. And I guess it just begs the question, at what point is the industry going to be prepared to wean itself off of this, or exactly, my colleague just said never. Let me ask you this. Would it be unreasonable as a compromise to grandfather the existing licensees who are the ones claiming we need this right now because this has become our business model, and I would proffer that it should not have become their business model when they knew all along it was temporary. But since those are the businesses coming in and saying, okay, this has become our business model, we need it to continue yet for a while until somehow there's a resolution. Would it be unreasonable to say, okay, if this is become your business model during this period of time and you've gotten a license to do this, that this legislation apply to those existing businesses that are saying we need this, but let's not open the door to others to come in and start doing this as well, because with each passing visit here to the legislature, as more and more businesses adopt this as their business model, they're going to be coming back to us and saying, well, now this is our business model as well. So is there any reason we would not contemplate just grandfathering in those who have adopted this practice and are claiming we've got to have this now to survive, and just cut off the bleeding going forward so that we don't have another 15, 20, 30, 40 businesses sitting down at this table in 2 years saying, this is our business model now. Does that not seem reasonable, a reasonable concession to those licensees who came in here and said, this is our business model now? And maybe just like I said, to it, if that's not, if otherwise it's, hey, we're just letting this industry do this. We clearly are going to be stepping into these Commerce Clause issues. And I think to date, perhaps we haven't had that because we keep giving the impression this is just temporary. So I'm just putting it out there as a thought.
No, I hear your thought. Can I call on Senator Bidle and then we just
Sure.
see where she's going and we have some conversation? Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just my thought. So years ago, we let wineries from all over the country register and ship wine by the case to our residents. This is meant for our local businesses, and you heard farmers and small businesses that are doing distillery and brewery here to ship within our state. So I feel like we're letting wineries from all over the country do this, but yet we're going to limit what our own businesses can do. Just my thought.
Well, but the point being that we're limiting our businesses because they're violating the law right now. And they were given an exemption and permitted to violate the law on a temporary basis by Governor Hogan. But it's not, hey, we want to grow small business. It's, hey, we're allowing these businesses right now to violate the law year to year as we're granting these extensions. And if the conversation is, are we going to allow direct shipping as the policy of the state of Maryland to all businesses, then we should have that conversation. But that's not what this bill is about. And that's not what happened when Governor Hogan did his thing. It wasn't, we want to help. And by the way, you start talking about, and look, I'm all into helping Maryland business, but that's where we start walking a very thin line of, okay, now you're opening the door, because if you're going to help Maryland business, you're going to start having some problems from out of state business saying, wait a minute, we have every right to be doing the exact same thing. So my point is, keep helping. I would be, for me, I could see a compromise being, you got the folks who came in and said, that's where we are right here, right now. We're helping them. That's my point.
Were you still wanting to respond to that?
No, I would just say we haven't been challenged. If we get challenged, we can stop. But I just feel like we're, trying to help our own small businesses. So let's
Okay.
see if we get challenged.
Senator Reedy.
Yeah, it may be more of a comment. I know this hearing was a while ago, but right now I'd be a no because I'm very uncertain about it. And I feel like I'd like to get to a comfort level, but I just couldn't vote for it right now. I've just got too many, but I, the more we talk about it, the more I'm like, we really should figure something out. And I think the amendments at least makes it a little bit less overarching, but I just am, I kind of wish this is something we could do a little more work on, but I understand we're down to, you know, this is our first year having alcohol in this committee. So a lot of us are new to this and.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go to Senator Mount
that's
yet,
just
and
a
I
comment.
hear your comment, and I guess I would say for me, and I haven't really weighed in on this conversation in this group, but just to say, I shared some of the concerns that have been raised, but I also got to the space where I said, this is our first year handling this issue. We've got a 2-year sunset gives us time to get our arms around it. I would probably tend to go with what Senator Bidel was saying, which is we have the opportunity to come back next year. I have not heard from businesses in my district saying that they've been devastated because of this provision. I've heard from the businesses that came here to say, please let us do this a little while longer. We got some additional revenue during the pandemic and we're still recovering. So that's where I'm kind of getting a little comfort with the extension. We'll go Senator Mounts, then Senator Lamb.
I know from my one constituent who's been a strong advocate that they really haven't recovered from COVID yet, even though the rest of the world has moved on. And so the idea of an extension makes sense. I don't discount the potential problems that critics of this special authority have raised, but I know from where they stay, if you get in their shoes, the world that they're looking at, they still haven't paid off the investments that they put in to try to open up this business. And they're either there's gonna have to be some kind of resolution. I readily admit that, but I'm gonna be supporting it with that caution of knowing that, you know, there's some issues that have to be addressed. And so, but they're not, we've had one summer, I think they've had one summer maybe of business after COVID, right? And even given that one summer, the whole supply chain, that world of distributing alcohol, that still has not become stable. It's still been unstable. So they've got a valid argument there. Just something to consider.
Thank you. Senator Lamb?
Thank you. I guess maybe I am one that has heard from folks back in the district of some concerns about this. And I guess I'm also probably the only one, now that Senator Ellis is not here, that came over from EHE where this was actually first discussed. And I can say that when this started a couple years ago, that we were assured that this was going to be temporary. And we were told that it was going to be temporary. And there was a lot of concern that was brought up when this bill was originally passed to enable this to occur, that this would be the slippery slope, that this would be the camel ding their nose under the tent, that this would open up this to eventually become permanent. And we had received all these reassurances that this was not the case. This was just for the public health emergency. And I think about the constitutionality argument, I think there was more, and I think it was my understanding from the testimony earlier, there was more to stand on to be potentially unconstitutional in the provisions from before, because it was a public health emergency, that we could say that, you know, we were suspending some of the concerns with interstate commerce because there was a public health emergency taking place. And even listening to this argument now, that the constitutional argument does give me pause, because in effect, we're acknowledging that it is unconstitutional. I don't think anyone's necessarily, making the case that there's strong constitutional arguments that it's not. We're waiting for a lawsuit, right? There could be a lawsuit to fully adjudicate this, but I think there's a general acknowledgement that there's some question as to the constitutionality piece of this. So I'm more in the camp of, it does give me pause, more in the camp of, if there's some way to kind of thread the needle on this. I understand Senator Kramer's point that, the longer we extend this, the more and more industries are going to get, or more and more businesses are going to get into this. It's just going to make it more difficult to ratchet back to the argument of when we were first sold this was intended to be temporary, was not intended to be permanent. I would almost be open more to a 1-year extension while some of the constitutionality arguments are made out, because it sounds like there may be some solutions to the constitutionality piece. But I am concerned about the slippery slope. The last piece that was brought up, I think, during the opposition testimony was enforcement of alcohol deliveries to folks that are underage. And I don't think that was addressed at all through the amendments.
Are you
Was that,
thinking of this or are you thinking of DoorDash? Which is separate bill?
was that DoorDash?
Different
Okay,
bill.
that was DoorDash. Okay, all right.
We're not doing.
We're not doing that now. Okay. That's got it. So, those are kind of my concerns.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorable? Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second for a favorable as amended on Senate Bill 448. Are there any additional questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. That's seven favorables. The bill will move forward with a favorable report. Next bill. Next bill.
Okay. The next,
Yes, come on in. The water's fine.
okay, the next bill is Senate Bill 555. This is the governor's bill that, as introduced, would have increased the minimum wage to $15 by October of this year. It would also have included indexing of this minimum wage going forward with some various controls over that as that process evolved. The bill also repeals language that was added in the Fight for 15 legislation in 2019 that would provide for increases to all the community providers funded by Medicaid, concurrent with the minimum wage, to keep them ahead of the minimum wage. You have a reprint in front of you, and you also have amendments offered by Senator Klossmeyer. We'll go through the reprint first, which has amendments offered by the chair. And let's just go straight to page. The whole front of the bill, most of the bill is actually the repealing the language in that the governor put in there regarding the support for the community providers. So if you go straight to page 19, you'll start the amendments offered by the sponsor. Or the not sponsor, the chair. And the first, on top of the page, you repeal the definition of consumer price index because these amendments take out indexing. And if you go to the bottom, you'll see that instead of having the $15 kick in for employers on October, this starts the process of saying it maintains the current minimum wage, which is $13.25. And as of on the top of page 10, beginning on January 1st, 2024, the minimum wage will be $15. All the rest of the language that is struck from the bill is the indexing. If you go to page 11, if you recall, back in 2019, there was 2 tiers of minimum wage. There was most of the employers in the state and those who are small employers. So they had a slower period to get to 15. What this bill does is it puts them on the same track, the small employers on the same track as the regular employers. And as of July 1st, 2024, they will have to pay their employees $15 an hour too. And January, did I say July? Oh, okay, January, sorry. So there'll be all employers in the state, subject to the state minimum wage law, as of January 1st, 2024, have to pay their employees at least $15 an hour. And then there's language that's going to be repealed at the bottom onto the next page. Back in 2019, you gave the Board of Public Works one chance to delay the implementation of the minimum wage increase should there be some economic circumstances. If you're going straight under this bill, if you go straight to 15, that doesn't apply anymore. And so this language is not necessary. And that's what the chair's amendments do to the bill. So it's very basic. All employers in the state subject to the minimum wage law will have to start paying their employees $15 on January 1st, 2024. No indexing, no nothing else. And that's her amendments. And then Senator Klossmeyer has an amendment, so I don't know how you want to.
I've talked it over and we're good, as long as the indexing is out.
Okay, so you're not going to offer your amendments. Okay, so that's what you have in front of you.
So is there any discussion? Senator Hershey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The previous bill did have a carve out for small businesses, right? Those under 12, that
The current law has a it's
Yeah.
not a carve out, it's just a slower,
slower, right? That,
Yeah.
that goes away under this?
yes.
So when we talk about that, small businesses are gonna go from 1212, well, 1280 now, but let's just say at the end of last year, it was 1220. And then the beginning of next year, so within a year's time, it's gonna go to $15. That's pretty substantial. Why can't we keep something in there for small businesses? Is that not? Well, I mean, I just.
So
Are we
basically,
negotiating?
Senator, I'll respond based on,
If we're negotiating, I mean.
on the amendments as described by council. Basically, the bill as introduced by the administration took everybody to $15 in October of
Right.
2023. So I just felt that what we've heard is that most businesses are actually advancing towards 15
Right.
anyway, just for competition for employees. And so I felt like the slower implementation, giving them till January versus October, which would really, even though I think this is an emergency bill, so no, no, it
There's
isn't.
no
So
reason
that
to-
would be, that would be July 1. They'll hear about it, obviously, if this passes and goes through both chambers in this posture. But giving them a little more lead time than the October date that came in, this would give them till January to prepare for that need to be ready to increase. It really is about the employees that are dealing with the cost of eggs and the price of milk and bread. They are having to pay more. And so this bill really seeks to help people manage their day-to-day expenses with limited resources. And some of them have more than one job, but the goal is to really help people be able to meet their needs.
Yeah.
And
And I.
whether they work for a
If
small or
if I
large
was in an
business.
argumentative mood, which I'm not because this has been a long week. But I think that part of the problem why food is so expensive is labor costs continue to go up as well too. So there is a little bit of a trade-off, I think. Well, everybody likes to say eggs, but it's not just everything, right? Everything's gone up, but labor has gone up. We've never ever seen signs that, Wawa's and Royal Farms saying that they'll pay $17 an hour, like we're doing now. So they're having to pay more money, which again, part of this bill is in a position of saying, okay, well, wages are increasing, but that also might be why cost of goods and services are increasing as well too.
No, I don't disagree with you. I think a part of that, and I'm exhausted too, so I'm not going to debate you, but I don't disagree. I think a part of it is still the supply chain issues that were dealt with. We saw some increases happening during that time. I cleaned my freezer out last weekend and I found some like chicken breast in there that were like before pre-pandemic, and the price compared to what we're paying now is it feels like it's almost double. And some of that was just related to getting the trucking and getting the food to, the stores and all of that. So I don't disagree with you. I just think that this is a reasonable approach to try to help take care of our employees in an environment where things are more expensive and jobs are more competitive without, being too onerous on our business community, because we do know that we have to be mindful and try to balance that as well. So.
And the week by saying, I agree with you, this is a much more reasonable approach. than what
Thank
we
you.
saw
Was that a
before.
motion?
It's not-
Can I just say, I agree with Senator Hershey, the smaller moms and pops and, the grocery stores and everyone else those kind of stores, rural farms, they can afford it, but the small independently owned pizza places, you know, it's tough on them.
It's, they're gonna lose their people to Royal Farms and Wawa. Thank you, Senator Mounts, for turning your mic on for your part of this conversation. I'd like to recognize Senator Mounts.
No, this is gonna be a hardship for a lot of businesses. It's a lot better than the original draft. However, because we're talking about this and we're in charge of finance and business and government policy, these small and independent businesses on the shore, you hear about costs and things, but I tell you, their number one issue is labor and how do they get employees? We just talked about jobs and the value of jobs are being advertised, but there's a Royal Farms in Easton that was open and they couldn't, it was a brand new Royal Farms. It took them over, I think it was 2 months before they can get employees at the rates that were just mentioned being advertised. So it's a real trying time right now in that small independent business world. I talked about it this morning at our delegation meeting, and since it's kind of on top, it's a little off. Sorry, it's late. Everybody's tired.
Thank you, Senator Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just proffer for this conversation that I think businesses are competing against a lot of things. It's not just the supply chain. In today's work world, you could work from home. You could be in another state and get a job in the comfort of your home, save on childcare and other things. And so there's a lot of factors that are contributing to employers having an opportunity to recruit employees. Employees post-pandemic have a lot more options. And so they're choosing to go with those employers that are offering a more well-rounded and beneficial package that help fit them in their lifestyle.
Senator Lamb, were you, yes.
Yeah, just very briefly, this is a separate kind of topic from this, but and I know I'm in the minority here, so but just want to make clear, I will vote against the amendments just because I actually support indexing. So just want to make that clear, but I don't think that.
We'll take
Thank you.
So
Yeah.
is there a motion on the amendments? Have a motion and a second. Look, I have a motion and a second for the favorable on the chair's amendments. I'm just kidding. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Those opposed? The amendments are adopted. Have a motion and a second for a favorable on Senate Bill 555 as amended. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposition, raise your hand.
No.
That bill will be reported favorable. Next bill.
It has to go to B and T.
Thank you. It has to go to B&T also.
Second on it.
Yep.
Okay, the next bill concerns animal testing research, human relevant research funding and animal testing and research. And you have a reprint in front of you. It's been retitled to contributions. As introduced, the bill would require that research facilities that do animal testing to be licensed by the health department. These licensing fees would then go to the established Human Relevant Research Fund in TEDCO, and it would be administered by TEDCO. And the purpose of these funds would to provide grants and loans to entities out there to do human relevant research without using animals. You have amendments in front of you on the reprint. Wait a minute. So if you go to page 2 of the reprint, you'll see that there's some changes to the economic development article that were in the bill. It strikes references to a board that would have overseen stem cell research. That is now gone from the bill. So that group that does that will no longer oversee, has any role at all with the funding of human relevant research in the state of Maryland. You go to page 2, all the changes to the TEDCO statute regarding this established new fund strike reference to that review board. And everything else is just clarifying or technical related to that. Go to page 4. Again, references to that particular board that oversees stem cell research is struck from the bill. And it changes the time frame for which a recipient to submit approval required under this subsection. Within 6 months, it takes out that time limitation for a grant to provide information to get money from this established fund. And if you go to page 6, you'll see that there's an annual report required on how this fund is being used and what projects are being used. If you go to the bottom page, these are where the significant changes are in the bill. It takes out the licensing requirement. Apparently there was negotiations between the research facilities, most of which are located with universities, and the folks who advocated for the bill. So instead of having a license, essentially all these research facilities have to contribute based on the size of the research facility. They have to contribute money they'll be mandated to contribute money to this fund that's established. You go to page 7, you'll see that what they have to contribute based on the number of animals. And the amount of fee paid under this subsection shall be based on the total number reported under a form that they have to now fill out, that they would be required to fill out. And there are clarifying changes on the bottom. Again, all the licensing requirements are struck. And then if you go to page 9, you'll see that the research facility who fails to pay the contribution required under this established new contribution requirement may be subject to a civil penalty to exceed not more than $1,000. So these are the changes. I believe the House is voting, the House Government Operations Committee is voting on the same bill this evening too, as similarly amended.
Senator Hershey, then Reedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, do you have any examples of who these, are they research firms that would be having to pay this fee now, or you say contribution, fee,
Contribution.
penalty, whatever? I mean,
You had testimony, the folks who were here, there's research facilities in Hopkins, there's research facilities in the University of Maryland system. So I would say there might be some more information about how many others there are, but these would be some of the significant ones in the state that still do research on animals.
so they would pay into the fund. Hopkins would pay into the fund, University of Maryland would pay into the fund,
Yes.
and then the fund is used by who for what?
The fund is going to go to TEDCO, who will administer the fund. And if you go to page 3 of the reprint, the purpose of the fund is to promote state-funded research intended to develop human-relevant alternatives to using non-human animals in medical product testing and research in the state of Maryland.
So we're giving money to TEDCO. They're gonna turn around and put it to other groups.
Who will be using non-animal research
And
to,
who are those groups?
I think that
Are those private sector groups?
they would
or-
be private sector groups. I guess public sector groups could.
It wouldn't be going back to Maryland or Johns
No, I don't-
Hopkins, right?
No, they would still allowed to be used animals in their research if they're following the guidelines by the federal government on the use of animals in testing.
Senator Hershey, hug the puppy.
These aren't puppies.
Come on, buddy.
Senator Reedy.
So am I correct in how I read this, that we got part of the purpose of this bill, I thought, was to create a licensing scheme for animals, for research on animals?
The entities that do research on animals would have been licensed under the original bill.
So now thank you. So now we've gotten rid of that, and now they just have to pay a fine.
They have to pay.
I'm sorry, a fee.
contribution. Yes, they have to pay a fee, which will go to this fund
A
to
fine.
help entities who may be interested in developing processes where they can do research that benefits humans without testing on
Like testing
animals.
viruses, like gain of function type stuff. or- Yeah, this seems like kind of like I don't know about this, man. I don't know. This is at $3 million, right? $3 million the state's gonna spend.
Well, we
or-
don't, there's an estimate. They don't really know how much, you know how many entities are out there and what they're gonna have to contribute, how much they actually spend. It depends on what the demand is for the how many entities come in and want to try to access grants to develop
we-
these novel
But we don't
approaches.
know how many entities
We do not
or
know.
if there's much demand.
We won't know that.
Okay, I think that, okay.
Senator Mounts, then Senator Kramer.
Just real quick, I'm not supporting this legislation. I know some of these institutions already invest in their own programs to get away from testing on animals.
Okay, thank you. Senator Kramer.
Thanks for sharing that. Colleagues, this is a good bill. The goal here is to start moving away from using animals in experimentation that suffer terribly in that experimentation. We are at a point in the 21st century, believe it or not, where technology has become so advanced that the archaic practice of torturing these animals in experimentation is no longer absolutely necessary. And in fact, the FDA has indicated that they have stopped requiring all drug tests to be done on animals. So it's a recognition of the fact there's incredible technology, and we want to start weaning ourselves off of torturing animals in experimentation. So this is a big step of moving in that direction. My understanding is, we had Hopkins and the university system here supporting this effort. So, it's time to rethink what we do with animals. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair.
Yeah, and I agree with Senator Kramer. And when they came into my office to talk to me, they had two veterinarians. So I know the animals are well taken care of. And I don't believe any, like the Humane Society, they were okay. And so it made me comfortable that way.
Senator Reedy,
I just,
again.
I don't like animal testing necessarily either. I don't know that we need to set up a complicated government scheme to extract money to find alternatives. I imagine the private sector's doing just fine investing in this, but also I just find it funny, all this talk about the 21st century modern medicine and torturing animals, and with what we've been through the last, well, all right.
All righty then. Okay, so we have before us Senate Bill 560. We have amendments. I'll entertain a motion.
Move favorable.
Have a motion and a second for a favorable on Senate Bill 560 with the amendments. Is there any unreadiness? Any need for discussion? Any further comments? Political statements? All those in favor of Senate Bill 560 with the amendments, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Those opposed, raise your hand. That's 3. Okay, Senate Bill 560 receives Mr. Senator, we're live. Senate Bill 560 with amendments receives a favorable report. Let's go to the next bill.
Okay, the next bill and the last bill on your list and your last business for the week, hopefully, is was held over from Wednesday's voting session. It concerns violations of the Workplace Fraud Act and the prevailing wage law. So we can go straight to the, if you recall, there was criminal penalties added, which were struck in both instances from the workplace fraud law for violations of knowing violations of workplace fraud and violations of the prevailing wage law. So those criminal penalties were struck, and there was some discussion about the language that was left requiring a referral to the comptroller's office for violations. So if you go to page 3, you'll see that there was some modification to the referral language, and clear and convincing evidence was struck because turns out that's more of a criminal, that's what you have in criminal law and not really appropriate for labor law. And this already means there has to be a knowing violation for this referral to occur. And then it was also added that a violation of this subtitle, which is knowing, and as authorized by federal and state law, the commissioner shall refer to the comptroller for investigation by the Field Enforcement Bureau of any complaint that alleges a violation of 13107, which is the businesses not providing the proper withholding and not providing proper information to the comptroller. And so that's for the workplace fraud law. And then on the last page, it's the same language for a violation of prevailing wage. But the word knowing is added and instead of clear and convincing evidence is struck. So on a showing that a knowing violation of this subtitle has occurred, again, the commissioner shall refer to the comptroller for an investigation by the Field Enforcement Bureau, which are all sworn police officers. Any complaint that alleges a violation under the authority in which the comptrollers folks can investigate violations of the tax law regarding wages that are paid.
All right, I have a motion and a second for a favorable with the amendments on Senate Bill 838. All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, any opposition, raise your hand. That bill receives a favorable report with 3 in opposition. That completes our work. The desk is clear. Have a great weekend. Oh.